Wow. It's so good to be home. I'm really glad to be with you today. I have some interesting things that I want to share. I want to thank you for managing to get in the room before my talk. And I'm glad that David has left the doors open so that whoever shows up soon can come right in. I'll let you know when they come in so you can applaud them. No, let's not do that. Everybody gets one time with the clock on this silliness. Anyway, so another reason that I mentioned the door being open is that I'm going to trust that you're going to stay with me today because I'm telling you a Bible story. Talking Bible today, okay? Maybe you should, no, that's all right. It's a wonderful story about a man named Nehemiah. Have you ever heard of Nehemiah? Yeah. Nehemiah lived about 500 years before Jesus. And he lived most of his life in Babylon. Do you know where the story is in the Bible? Do you know what that'd be a good guess, but it's actually Ezra. No, it isn't. It's Nehemiah. He's mentioned in Ezra, though. Yeah, the book of Nehemiah is where the story of this man is. I want to tell you all about him. This is an artist's rendering. That's not a photograph of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a slave, as was true in the time because the Persian Empire engulfed Israel, and he was an Israeli, and he had no choice in the matter. That's the way it worked back then. If you were were a resident of an occupied country, and you moved to the capital of that occupier, you were a slave. And there were certain things you couldn't do when you were a slave. To whatever level, obviously, we think of slaves usually having a whip over their heads and having to pull chains, but that's not true. It simply means, that idea of slavery means that you don't have free will to do in your life what you want. Someone else is making decisions for you and deciding what the boundaries in your life are. And if you break through those boundaries, chances are you're going to be killed. So this was very serious business. But Nehemiah was a really smart guy. And he was quite capable in his abilities. Now, being a slave, he could raise to the level of a lot of things, but he could not be a supervisor or a leader or a government official because that would put him over the people that were his occupiers. So he couldn't do that. But he did finally find a way in his life to be very effective. And the way that is that he was called the king's cupbearer. King's cupbearer, which is an interesting thing. It says a lot in that one idea. He was the one that would take whatever wine or drink that was to be given to the king, he would pour some in his hand and he would drink it. And if he didn't die, he would hand it to the king. Now, that sounds awful, right? I mean, the idea of somebody who wanted to poison the king. But because he did that with every single drink that went to the king knew that he wasn't going to be poisoned, and everyone around knew that they couldn't poison the king because Nehemiah is the one that would get it. Now, there's another angle to this, too, because there must have been a high level of trust from that Persian king about Nehemiah because he was the only one that could easily poison the king. So clearly there was a lot of trust, and he had developed that in his position within the hierarchy of the Babylonian Empire. But he was a Jew, and he came from Jerusalem. And although he had this wonderful life and got to do great things and was there in service to the king, one of the few people that actually was able to counsel this great king, he couldn't do much about what was going on back in his homeland. Jerusalem, being an occupied land, was having a lot of problems. There was a great wall that had been built around Jerusalem, and during the occupation, the wall had been torn down. Not completely to the ground, but the gates were gone, they were burned. And people came and went from the city. It had no security at all. So the people obviously realized that they had no ability to be free to live their lives because there were gangs. And there were warlords, and there were people that would just come and take from them or kill them, and no one would do anything. And Nehemiah heard of these stories from his homeland. And because he was loved by the king, he decided that he needed to do something. So he took it into prayer. Being a good observant Jew, he took it into prayer and reflection. And he came up with a plan. He said that he he decided that he was going to ask the king for permission to go back to his homeland and to make it whole again. But how do you ask a king that kind of request when you're a slave? So one day when he was in the court of the council of the king asked him why he looked so sad. Apparently the king has a lot of happy people around him. And Nehemiah explained to the king that his heart was hurting, that his people were suffering, and that he wanted to help them. And the king said, "How can you help?" He said to the king that if you would allow me to go back to my homeland, and if you would allow me to go into your forest and gather trees and lumber so that I could take it back and rebuild my city, that would make me very happy. It's pretty clear the king loved Nehemiah because he not only let him go, well, he did have one other question though. He asked him how long. And although it doesn't say in Scripture how long that was, from most of the study that's been done, it was some very short time. It was something less than 6 months. So the king said he could go. That he could go and he could take lumber from the royal forest, and that he would take escorts with him. And the king wanted to make sure that he understood that Nehemiah had to come back. And he agreed. And he was an honorable man. So he moved forward to do this great thing. He carried with him an entourage of military people to support him, and was actually named by the king the governor of Jerusalem, because he could be over his own people. And he showed up. He showed up with all these people, and he surveyed the situation in Jerusalem. It was dire. Things were in bad shape. The people were dying. The people were living in horrible conditions. Nothing was safe. Nothing was sacred. There was still the Jewish spiritual leadership there, but they couldn't do anything but hide. There were other people in charge, but they were there simply to take from these people, so they weren't any help. But Nehemiah looked around the city and realized that he couldn't do everything to fix what he needed to in the time that he had. So he decided that he would do one thing. He would rebuild that wall. That wall that circled the great city of Jerusalem. So he went to the leaders and said, "This is what we're going to do." He's the governor now. They're supposed to listen to him, right? They scoffed at him. Because actually, there had been a time when the king said, "You cannot rebuild the wall. So you're going to go against your king?" He understood that he had permission to do whatever he chose to do. So he said, "Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to rebuild this wall." But they weren't going to help. So Nehemiah realized he was on his own, that he had no support from the official leadership of that community. And he went out asking people to help. And they did. In fact, there's a whole chapter in Nehemiah that names all the families and clans that showed up to help. There were actually clans that didn't even live in Jerusalem that heard about it in other lands that came and brought teams of people to help build the wall. This did not make everybody happy, especially those gangs. They wanted no part of this. So they did everything they could to get in the way. They regularly sent in teams of people to attack the builders of the wall at night, to tear it back down where they could. But Nehemiah's forces were able to hold them off. And that did nothing, of course, but make them more angry. And what it did for the people that lived in Jerusalem made them more interested. So they came out to see what was going on. Even the leaders of the Jewish faith came out to see what was going on. And ended up, every time something was completed, they would bless it. And there was this whole shift of energy in the city of Jerusalem. Now, all these forces on the outside that wanted to have that control, they actually had all been fighting among themselves, but they decided to gather their forces and take on the city as one outside force. It didn't work. The people were so united around what was happening that they could not be defeated. There were other problems too. And in the midst of building this wall, Nehemiah did what he could to support the people, but his focus was the wall. That was the one thing he was certain he could get done. And he didn't leave that to other people and sit in an office somewhere overseeing them. He got up and worked on the wall. He showed the people what he wanted, and they followed his leadership. So these warlords that ran these gangs were realizing they weren't going to be able to defeat Nehemiah and do what they had done, so they wanted to negotiate with him. So they sent an envoy. And the envoy received them and saw what they wanted, heard what they wanted, and they went to Nehemiah. And they called up to him on the wall. They said, Nehemiah, representatives from the gangs are here and they want to negotiate with you. He said, no, I cannot come down. No, they're here to make peace. They want to make peace with us. No, no. Nehemiah, you must do this. You must come down and talk to these people. Nehemiah had had enough. Nehemiah had had enough from even those beloveds that he adored and was there to support, but he would not lose his focus. He would not lose his focus. So he called down to those people and said, I am doing a great work, and I will not come down. I am doing a great work. I cannot come down. This is what I am here to do. I'm not here to negotiate with the criminals. I'm here to do a great work. And I cannot come down. Can you hear him saying that? It's a great story, isn't it? And as it turns out, Nehemiah rebuilt the wall. And it did not end the occupation by the Persians, but it did change the way Jerusalem existed. There was confidence in the people. They began to work together instead of fighting. They created a strong economy. And when the time was right, they were again free as a people. Much because of what Nehemiah did. It was a great thing that he did. So why am I telling you this story? Because I think there's some really important lessons in here for us. And I want to start right at the beginning of the story. What's the first thing I told you about Nehemiah? He was a slave. So are you a slave? Sometimes. Sometimes we are. First of all, we so identify with these bodies that we think that's what it's about. We so identify with who we are in our bodies that we think that what's going on in our bodies is us. Now, I know there's been a few people on this planet that have been able to do some interesting things like bilocate or, astral travel or those kind of things. Whether or not those are true, I'm not interested right now. What I'm interested in is explaining that there are limitations that we set upon ourselves by being in this world of effects that we think are real. And those are the base ones, what's going on in your body. There's something I've been teaching for years called the 4 pillars of life. And I believe that among the 4 of them, not that they stand separately as much as you would imagine pillars, but that among the 4 of them, that each provides an area of focus and interest in our lives. And I think that this idea of being a slave falls much into this idea, because it's not so much that we've agreed to be in human form, but that we think that it's real. And we play at the level of thinking that what's going on in the physical realm is what guides and directs us, is what causes anything in our lives. And it doesn't. So here's the first of the 4. I've already talked about it. Health. The idea of what's going on with our body somehow is out of our control. It's not. Now, that doesn't mean things don't happen. They do. What do we do with that information? It was interesting. We had our cleanup day yesterday, and it wasn't a big group, but it was a wonderful group, and they worked hard. And Breezy and Jen came and worked in the kitchen. Now, if you see Jen walk across this room with her walking, you might think, oh, well, poor thing, she's somehow limited in scope of what she can do. I saw that woman climbing ladders yesterday to get up on top of the cabinets to clean stuff.
Yay.
Don't tell me that woman thinks she can't. And that because her body has certain conditions within it, like we've talked about, that somehow that limits who she is. It does not. Thank you. Wonderful lesson. Thank you, Breezy, for being there through that whole thing, too. You're a cleaner machine. Our bodies are our tools. Our bodies are our tools. That doesn't mean that we don't have some challenges with them now and again. But we have the ability to take the information that we have and make our lives work. That's what's important. That's what's meaningful. The second of these pillars is wealth. Oh, I don't have enough money. You've been around here any time at all, and you know that doesn't hold water for a minute. That you create the money in your life, that you create the flow in your life, that you create the outcome in your life that has anything to do with your finances. And we love you, and we're going to work with you, but we're not going to believe you when you say that you can't, that money doesn't work in your life, because that's your choice. And we will take that to wherever we need to go. It's not summer yet, but it will be, and that will be a major topic around this place. We create that in our lives. The third one is relationships. Relationships is a pillar. The relationship that we have with a beloved, with a partner, the relationship that we have with our co-workers, relationships that we have in our spiritual community, and the relationship we have with ourselves. Key to how we live our lives. And the fourth one, of course, is self-expression, how we express into the world, what we bring to the world as our gift. So I want to look at this like building a wall. When you're down near the base of that, you're building a foundation based on what you think, what you believe. Now that doesn't mean you can't change those in a moment's notice. You can change what you believe at any second. But if you build a strong foundation of belief in yourself, in the presence of the divine within you, then you create the foundation that builds beautiful, elegant pillars. If you want success in your life, you must work on all of these. It isn't good to have 3 of them working and let the last one just fall down. It doesn't work. Because the city of Jerusalem, if it had a beautiful wall all the way around except one place, how secure is the city? It's not. These are the 4 things to work on. So when Nehemiah went into the city and said, we're going to rebuild the wall, he had to mean the whole wall. He had to mean every inch of that perimeter around that city. And that's what we are doing with our lives. We're building a great life. We are doing a great work. We are called with this last pillar to create something extraordinary in our lives. That doesn't mean you're going to be on CNN. It doesn't mean that somebody's going to pat you on the back, but you have a reason to be here to do something that no one else can do. And your expression in the world is up to you. You have a covenant with that divine nature within you to do something. You know how you can tell when you're not doing it? You're miserable. And you know how you can tell when you are doing it? You feel great. Your life is full and rich. But it takes all 4. You can't focus all on self-expression saying, I'm here for this great thing to do in the world, and not take care of the rest of that. You got to take care of it all. This one, Nehemiah, brings us a great and powerful lesson of who we are and how we're to live our lives. He was a great man, but he could easily have said, you know, I'm so busy here in Babylon that I really can't take that up. I can't worry about that. I've got to take care of stuff here. The king needs me to see if he's getting poisoned. But he didn't. And he returned. And he served the king the rest of his life. But he made a difference. That's something all of us are here to do. This community gets an opportunity to make a difference this week. We do some extraordinary things here. We do some amazing things. But the rest of our colleagues in communities of New Thought, of Unity, or Divine Science, or many of our own colleagues don't have any idea about some of the ways that we do things that really work here. And this is our week to shine and to show them. And that's one reason I want you to come be with us for this. It's going to be a great week. We're going to make a difference in the world this week with the lives that we touch, for those that come in and take what we give them, and we're giving them a pile of stuff to take back with them, to change and use in their communities. Our purpose is to change the world, and that's what we're doing. And I can't do it alone. Barbara can't do it alone. Christy can't do it alone. Our practitioners can't do it by themselves. It takes all of us. So thank you for being willing to do this. But I'd like to really see how willing you are. The words are, I am doing a great work, and I will not come down. Can you say that with me? I am doing a great work, and I will not come down. Say it again. I am doing